Okay. Hello and welcome to another Cabbage Patch.
I'm one of your hosts, Paege Turner.
I am the other one, ARIES ALXNDR. I don't have my glasses because the lighting is weird and it made me disappear. So we'll see how reading goes.
Yeah, get really close. And
yes, words.
You look like you're just figuring out what technology is.
Well, joke's on you because I am. I actually edited a video this week.
I'm proud of you.
5 minutes long and it's like 10 shots. And I did I put the videos in and I cut them and I matched them up to music and I did transitions and everything and I never want to do it again.
I'm like just learning how to do that too. But I kind of love it.
I was editing and I had Taylor, who understands the program, in the house. And I had my drag daughter, Ivana Alexander, who also understands the program and is a film major, ready at the text. And I was constantly like, what is this? How do I do that? Why is it doing that? And for a while I thought I broke it, but apparently the program, I was using Adobe Premiere, and it doesn't like it if you rename files. And so it told me that everything had disappeared because I renamed something.
Wait, what were you using?
Adobe Premiere. You can do like I need to remember to cancel my subscription because you can get like a 7-day free trial. And I was like, I can edit a video in a week. I don't want to pay $30.
Was it confusing?
There's a lot of different screens that it automatically gives you, which can definitely be confusing. But like it's got some tutorial videos, and then once you do something once, like it's pretty much just the same thing over and over, which is pretty nice. And then you can like see what all of the clips are, like off to the side, and then you can see the ones you're currently working on in a section, and then it like automatically saves for you sometimes if you have that turned on, which is super useful if you're very bad with technology like me. Wow.
You get disconnected first, dude.
But it was a time, and I'm glad that it's over, and I don't really plan on doing it again for a while unless I have to, so.
I like this new like video drag stuff, but I like that it lets me like have more control over different elements. So it's kind of fun to get those like little tight shots in. But I don't know. I've realized that I have video editing software on my like computer that came with my Windows. It's like, okay. So I was like, that's really helpful. You?
I think like let's see, today I have this is the main book. It's 6 by Seuss, and it's got a bunch of Dr. Seuss stories in there. But today I will be reading, if I can go back to the first page because these illustrations take a while. There we go. I will be reading The 500 Hats of Bartholomew Cubbins. One of my favorite Dr. Seuss stories.
Oh wait, no, I think I remember that book. Is that the book that they always made us wear a bunch of hats on in elementary school? Or is that a different book?
I have no idea.
I just remember there was like a hat day, and I feel like it was about that book. I'm reading Just My Luck. It's an ebook, so but it's a Fancy Nancy. I don't know if this will work.
I can kind of see it.
It's so awkward. There we go. No, light.
Blinded by the light.
By Jane O'Connor, though. So, it looks cute, though. I haven't read this one, so I'm excited. Also, this is
I haven't read Fancy Nancy books in a really long time. I remember them being fun.
Yeah, I was confused also about how ebooks can be like not available.
Yeah, that confused me too. But I guess like it kind of makes sense because I used to have a Kindle when I was in like middle school. Like you have to like buy an ebook, and that's like your copy of it. So I guess libraries can only purchase so many copies.
I guess that makes sense. It's still just confusing. We have 5 people watching. One of them is
Hello, friends. We're so popular. We've got at least what, like 2 or 3 other friends with us, depending on how many of us personally are watching the stream. It's okay though, because we do get to post it on YouTube, which means that it will be available for a while afterwards for people to view.
Yeah.
Later.
We edit out the annoying stuff like this.
No, it's just downloaded straight and goes right on in. Now, the one from last week, it currently has 10 views on YouTube, which is super fun. And I'm glad that people are getting a chance to see the stuff that we're doing. Speaking of doing stuff, how about I get started reading?
Yeah.
Oh. The 500 Hats of Bartholomew Cubbins, which is, by the way, a really cool name. In the beginning, Bartholomew Cubbins didn't have 500 hats. He had only one hat. It was an old one that had belonged to his father and his father's father before him. It was probably the oldest and the plainest hat in the whole kingdom of Did, where Bartholomew Cubbins lived. But Bartholomew liked it, especially because of the feather that always pointed straight up in the air. The kingdom of Did was ruled by King Derwin. His palace stood high on the top of the mountain. On his balcony, he looked down over the houses of all his subjects. First, over the spires of the noblemen's castles, across the broad roofs of the rich men's mansions, then over the little houses of the townsfolk to the huts of the farmers far off in the fields. It was a mighty view, and it made King Derwin feel mighty important. Far off in the fields, on the edge of a cranberry bog, stood the hut of the Cubbins family. From the small door, Bartholomew looked across the huts of the farmers, to the houses of the townfolk, then to the rich men's mansions and the noblemen's castles, up to the great towering palace of the king. It was exactly the same view that King Derwin saw from his balcony, but Bartholomew saw it backward. It was a mighty view, but it made Bartholomew Cubbins feel mighty small. Just after sunrise one Saturday morning, Bartholomew started for town. He felt very happy. A pleasant breeze whistled through the feather in his hat. In his right hand he carried a basket of cranberries to sell at the market. He was anxious to sell them quickly and bring the money back home to his parents. He walked faster and faster till he got to the gates of the town. The sound of silver trumpets rang through the air. Hoofbeats clattered on the cobbled streets. "Clear the way! Make way for the king!" All the people rushed for the sidewalks. They drove their carts right up over the curbstones. Bartholomew clutched his basket tighter. Around the corner dashed 50 trumpeters on yellow-robed horses. Behind them, on crimson-robed horses, came the king's own guards. "Hats off to the king!" shouted the captain of the king's own guards. On came the king's carriage, white and gold and purple. It rumbled like thunder through the narrow street. It swept past Bartholomew. Then suddenly its mighty brakes shrieked. It lurched, and then it stopped. The whole procession stood still. Bartholomew could hardly believe what he saw. Through the side window of the carriage, the king himself was staring back, straight back at him. Bartholomew began to tremble. "Back up!" the king commanded the royal coachman. The royal coachman shouted to the royal horses. The king's own guards shouted to their crimson-robed horses. The trumpeters shouted to their yellow-robed horses. Very slowly, the whole procession backed down the street, until the king's carriage stopped right in front of Bartholomew. The king leaned from his carriage window and fixed his eyes directly on Bartholomew Cubbins. Well, well, he demanded. Bartholomew shook with fright. I ought to say something, he thought to himself, but he could think of nothing to say. Well, demanded the king again, do you or do you not take your hat off before your king? Yes, indeed, sire, answered Bartholomew, feeling greatly relieved. I do take off my hat before my king. Then take it off this very instant, commanded the king, more loudly than before. But, sire, my hat is off, answered Bartholomew. Such impudence, shouted the king, shaking an angry finger. How dare you stand there and tell me your hat is off? I don't like to say you are wrong, sire, said Bartholomew very politely, but you see, my hat is off. And he showed the king the hat in his hand. If that's your hat in your hand, demanded the king, what's that on your head? On my head? Gasped Bartholomew. There did seem to be something on his head. He reached up his hand and touched a hat. The face of Bartholomew Cubbins turned very red. It's a hat, sire, he stammered, but it can't be mine. Someone behind me must have put it on my head. I don't care how it got there, said the king. You take it off. And the king sat back in his carriage. Bartholomew quickly snatched off the hat. He stared at it in astonishment. It was exactly the same as his own hat. The same size, the same color, and it had exactly the same feather. By the crown of my fathers, roared the king again, leaning out of the carriage window. Did I or did I not command you to take off your hat? You did, sire. I took it off. I took it off twice. Nonsense. There is still a hat upon your head. Another hat? Again, Bartholomew reached up his hand, touched a hat. Come, come, what is the meaning of all this? Demanded the king, his face purple with rage. I don't know, sire, answered Bartholomew. It never happened to me before. The king was now shaking with such fury that the carriage rocked on its wheels, and the royal coachman could hardly sit in his seat. Arrest this impudent trickster, shouted the king to the captain of the king's own guards. We'll teach him to take off his hat. The royal coachman cracked his long whip. The king's carriage swung forward up the street toward the palace. But the captain of the king's own guards leaned down from his big brass saddle and grabbed Bartholomew Cubbins by his shirt. Away flew Bartholomew's basket. The cranberries bounced over the cobblestones and rolled down into the gutter. With a jangling of spurs and a clatter of horseshoes, the captain and Bartholomew sped up the winding street toward the palace. Out of the narrow streets, on up the hill. Bartholomew clung to the captain's broad back. On and on they galloped, past the bright gardens of the wealthy merchants, higher and higher up the mountain, on past the walls of the noblemen's castles. Whoop! Sharp wind whisked off Bartholomew's hat. Flop, flop. Two more flew off. Flop, flop, flop. Flew another, and another. 4, 5, 6, 7. Bartholomew kept counting as the hats came faster and faster. Lords and ladies stared from the windows of their turrets, wondering what the strange stream of hats could mean. Over the palace drawbridge they sped, through the great gates and into the courtyard. The captain pulled in his reins. His Majesty waits in the throne room, said a guard, saluting the captain. Throne room! The captain dropped Bartholomew to the ground. I'd certainly hate to be in your shoes, he said, shaking his head sadly. For a moment, Bartholomew was terribly frightened. Still, he thought to himself, the king can do nothing dreadful to punish me, because I really haven't done anything wrong. It would be cowardly to feel afraid. Bartholomew threw back his shoulders and marched straight ahead into the palace. Follow the black carpet, said the guard at the door. All through the long hallway, Bartholomew could hear the muttering of voices behind heavy doors. He won't take off his hat? No, he won't take off his hat. Bartholomew walked on until he stood in the very middle of the throne room. The king, in a long scarlet robe, was sitting on his throne. Beside him stood Sir Alaric, keeper of the king's records. He wore in his belt, instead of a sword, a long silver ruler. Lords and noblemen of the court stood solemn and silent. The king looked down at Bartholomew severely. "Young man, I'll give you one more chance. Will you take off your hat for your king?" "Your Majesty," said Bartholomew as politely as he could, "I will, but I'm afraid it won't do any good." And he took off his hat, and it didn't do any good. Another hat sat on Bartholomew's head. He took off hat after hat after hat after hat until he was standing in the middle of a great pile of hats. The lords and noblemen were so astonished they couldn't even speak. Such a thing had never happened in the throne room before. "Heavens!" said Sir Alaric, keeper of the records, blinking behind his triangular spectacles. "He's taken off 45! And there were 3 more down in the town," said the king. "And you must add on 87 more that blew off my head as we galloped up the hill," said Bartholomew, trying to be helpful. 135 hats? Most unusual," said Sir Alaric, writing it down on a long scroll. Come, come," said the king impatiently. "Sir Alaric, what do you make of all this nonsense?" "Very serious nonsense, your majesty," answered Sir Alaric. "I advise you call in an expert on hats." "Excellent," agreed the king. "Ho, guard! Fetch in Sir Snips, maker of hats for all the fine lords." Into the throne room marched the smallest man, wearing the tallest hat that Bartholomew had ever seen. It was Sir Snips. Instead of a sword, he wore at his side a large pair of scissors. "Take a look at this boy's hat," commanded the king. Sir Snips looked at Bartholomew Cubbin's hat and sniffed in disgust. Then he turned to the king and bowed stiffly. "Your Majesty, I, Sir Snips, am the maker of hats for all the fine lords. I make hats of cloth of gold, fine silks and gems, and ostrich plumes. You ask me what I think of this hat? Pooh! It is the most ordinary hat I ever set eyes on." "In that case," said the king, "it should be very simple for you to take it off." "Simple indeed," mumbled Sir Snips haughtily, and, standing on his tiptoes, he pushed his pudgy thumb at Bartholomew's hat and knocked it to the floor. Immediately, another appeared on Bartholomew's head. "Screamers!" screamed Sir Snips, leaping in the air higher than he was tall. Then he turned and ran shrieking out of the throne room. "Dear me," said the king, looking very puzzled. "If Snips can't do it, this must be more than an ordinary hat." 136, wrote Sir Alaric, wrinkling his brow. "Your Majesty, I advise that you call in your wise men." "A fine idea," said the king. "Ho, guard! Bring me Nad. Nad knows about everything in all my kingdom." In came an old, old man. He looked at the hat on Bartholomew's head, and he looked at the pile of hats on the floor. "Nad, my wise man, can you take off his hat?" asked the king. Nad shook his head solemnly. Solemnly, no. "Then fetch me the father of Nad," commanded the king. "He knows about everything in all my kingdom and in all the world beyond." In came an even older man. But when he looked at Bartholomew's hats, the father of Nad merely locked his fingers across his beard and said nothing. "And bring me the father of Nad," ordered the king. "He knows about everything in all my kingdom, in all the world beyond, and in all other worlds that may happen to be." Then came the oldest man of them all. He just looked at Bartholomew and nibbled nervously at the end of his beard. "Does this mean that there is no one in my whole kingdom who can take off this boy's hat?" bellowed the king in a terrifying voice. A small voice came up through the balcony window. "What's the matter, Uncle Derwin?" To Bartholomew, it sounded like the voice of a boy. The king stepped out on the balcony and leaned over the marble railing. "There's a boy in here, just about your age," the king said. "He won't take off his hat." Bartholomew tiptoed up behind the king and looked down. There stood a boy with a big lace collar. A very proud little boy. tower with his nose in the air. It was the Grand Duke Wilfred, nephew of the king. "You send him down here," said the Grand Duke Wilfred. "I'll fix him." The king thought for a minute. He pushed back his crown and scratched his head. "Well, maybe you can. There's no harm trying." "Take him to the Grand Duke Wilfred," commanded the king. Two of the king's own guards led Bartholomew out of the throne room. "Who?" said the Grand Duke Wilfred, looking at Bartholomew's hat and laughing meanly. "That hat won't come off? You stand over there." He pointed to a corner where the wall curved out. "I need a little target practice with my bow and arrow." When Bartholomew saw that the Grand Duke Wilfred had only a child's bow, he didn't feel frightened. He spoke up proudly. "I can shoot with my father's big bow." "My bow's plenty big enough for shooting hats, especially hats like yours," answered Wilfred, and he let fly an arrow. Zzz! It grazed Bartholomew's forehead and nipped off his hat. Away it blew, and over the parapet. But another hat appeared on his head. Zzz! 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 The arrows flew, till the Grand Duke's whole bag full of arrows were gone. And still, a hat sat upon Bartholomew's head. "It's not fair!" cried the Grand Duke. "It's not fair!" He threw down his bow and stamped upon it. 154 hats, gulped Sir Alaric. "These hats are driving me mad!" The king's voice rang out through all the palace. "Why waste time with a child's bow and arrow? Fetch me the mightiest bow and arrow in all my realm. Fetch the yeoman of the bowmen." "Yeoman of the bowmen," echoed all the lords and noblemen of the court. A gigantic man strode out across the terrace. His bow was as big as the branch of a tree. The arrow was twice as long as Bartholomew and thicker than his wrist. "Yeoman of the bowmen," said the king, "shoot off this boy's hat and make it stay off." Bartholomew was trembling so hard that he could scarcely stand straight. The yeoman bent back his mighty bow. Zip! Like a mad giant hornet, the arrow tore through the air toward Bartholomew Cubbins. Zap! The sharp arrowhead bit through his hat and carried it off, on and on for a full half-mile. Zop! It plunked to a stop in the heart of an oak tree. Yet there on Bartholomew's head sat another hat. The face of Yeoman the bowman went white as the palace falls. "It's black magic!" he shrieked. "Black magic? That's just what it is," said the king with relief. "I should have thought of that before. That makes things simple. Back to the throne room. Call my magicians." The whole throne room, there wasn't a sound as loud as a breath. From the spiral stairs that led down from the southwest tower came the shuffling of slow, padded feet. The magicians were coming. Low and slow, they were chanting words that were strange. "Dig a hole 5 furlongs deep, down to where the night snakes creep. Mix and mold the mystic mud, Mulber, Dalber, Titter, Tud." In came 7 black-gowned magicians, and beside each one stalked a lean black cat. They circled around Bartholomew Cubbins, muttering deep and mysterious sounds. "Stop this useless muttering," ordered the king. "I want a chat that will charm away this boy's hat." The magicians huddled over Bartholomew and chanted, "Incubus, tincubus, quadici, play. Hat on this demon's head, fly far away. Howl, men, howl away, howl away, howl away. Yowl, cats, yowl away, yowl away, yowl away. Hat on this demon's head, seep away, creep away, leap away, gleep away, never come back." "A mighty good chant," said the king, looking very pleased. "Are you sure it will work?" All the magicians nodded together. "But," said the king, looking puzzled, "there still seems to be a hat upon his head. How long will it take for the charm to work?" "Be calm, O sire, and have no fears," chanted the magicians. "Our charm will work in 10 short years." 10 years! Gasped the king. "Away, fools!" he shouted. "Out of my sight! I can't wait 10 years to get rid of this hat. Oh dear, what can I do? What can I do?" "If I were king," whispered the Grand Duke Wilfred, "I'd chop off his head." "A dreadful thought," said the king, biting his lip. "But I'm afraid I'll have to." "Young man," he said to Bartholomew Cubbins. He pointed to a small door at the end of the room. "March down those steps to the dungeon and tell the executioner to chop off your head." Bartholomew's heart sank into his boots, but he did as the king commanded. "I must take off my hat," he said to himself as he started down the long black stairway. "This is my chance." One hat after another he tore from his head. 156, 157, 158. It grew colder and damper. 217, 218, 219. Down, down, down. 231, 232, 233. It seemed to Bartholomew he must be in the very heart of the mountain. "Who's there?" said a voice from the blackness. Bartholomew turned a corner and stepped into the dungeon. The executioner was whistling and swinging his axe idly, because at the moment he had nothing to do. In spite of his business, he really seemed to be a very pleasant man. "The king says you must chop off my head," said Bartholomew. "Oh, I'd hate to," said the executioner, looking at him with a friendly smile. "You seem like such a nice boy." "Well, the king says you have to," said Bartholomew, "so please get it over with." "All right," said the executioner, "but first you've got to take off your hat." "Why?" said Bartholomew. "I don't know," said the executioner, "but it's one of the rules. I can't execute anyone with his hat on." "All right," said Bartholomew, "you take it off for me." The executioner leaned across the chopping block, flipped off Bartholomew's hat. "What's this?" he gasped, blinking through the holes in his mask, as another hat sat on Bartholomew's head. He flipped this one off, then another, and another. "Fiddlesticks!" grunted the executioner, throwing his axe on the floor. "I can't execute you at all." And he shook hands with Bartholomew and sent him back upstairs to the king. The king had been taking a nap on the throne. "What are you doing back here?" he said to Bartholomew, angry at being awakened. "I'm sorry, your majesty," exclaimed Bartholomew. "My head can't come off with my hat on. It's against the rules." "So it can't," said the king, leaning back wearily. "How many hats does that make altogether?" "The executioner knocked off 13, and I left 178 more on the dungeon steps," answered Bartholomew. 346 hats, mumbled Sir Alaric from behind his scroll. "Uncle Derwin," yawned the Grand Duke Wilfred, "I suppose I'll have to do away from him. Send him up to the highest turret, and I, in person, will push him off." "Wilfred, I'm surprised at you," said the king, "but I guess it's a good idea." So the king and the Grand Duke led Bartholomew Cubbins toward the highest turret. Up and up the turret stairs he climbed behind them. "This is my very last chance," thought Bartholomew. He snatched off his hat. 347! He snatched off another. He pulled and he tore and he flung them behind him. 398! 399! His arms ached from pulling off hats. Still the hats came. Bartholomew climbed on. 448, 449, 450, counted Sir Alaric, puffing up the stairs behind him. Suddenly, Sir Alaric stopped. He looked. He took off his triangular spectacles and wiped them on his sleeve. Then he looked again. The hats began to change. Hat 451 had not one, but two feathers. Hat 452 had three, and 453 also had three, and a little red jewel. Each new hat was fancier than the hat just before. "Your Majesty! Your Majesty!" cried out Sir Alaric. But the king and the Grand Duke were way up where they couldn't hear. They had already reached the top of the highest turret. Bartholomew was following just behind. Step right up here and get on the wall, snapped the Grand Duke Wilfred. I can't wait to push you off. But when Bartholomew stepped up on the wall, they gasped in amazement. He was wearing the most beautiful hat that had ever been seen in the Kingdom of Did. It had a ruby larger than any the king himself had ever owned. It had ostrich plumes, and cockatoo plumes, and mockingbird plumes, and paradise plumes. Besides such a hat, even the king's crown seemed like nothing. Grand Duke Wilfred took a step forward. Bartholomew thought his end had come at last. Wait! Shouted the king. He could not take his eyes off the magnificent hat. I won't wait, Grand Duke talked back to the king. I'm going to push him off now. That new big hat makes me madder than ever. He flung out his arms to push Bartholomew off. But the king was quicker than Wilfred. He grabbed him by the back of his fine lace collar. This is to teach you, His Majesty said sternly, that Grand Dukes never talk back to their king. He turned the Grand Duke Wilfred over his knee and spanked him soundly, right on the seat of his royal silk pants. And now, smiled the king, lifting Bartholomew down from the wall, it would be nice if you'd sell me that wonderful hat. $4.98, $4.99, broke in the tired voice of Sir Alaric, who had just arrived at the top of the steps. And that, he pointed to the hat on Bartholomew's head, makes exactly 500. 500! Exclaimed the king. Will you sell it for 500 pieces of gold? Anything you say, sire, answered Bartholomew. You see, I've never sold one before. The king's hands trembled with joy as he reached for the hat. Slowly, Bartholomew felt the weight of the great hat lifted from his head. He held his breath. And suddenly, he felt a cool evening breeze blow through his hair. His face broke into a happy smile. The head of Bartholomew Cubbins was bare. Look, Your Majesty, look! He shouted to the king. No, you look at me, answered the king, and the great hat went on right over his crown. Arm in arm, the king and Bartholomew went down to the counting room to count out the gold. Then the king sent Bartholomew home to his parents. No basket on his arm, no hat on his head, but with 500 pieces of gold in a bag. And the king commanded that the hat he had bought, and all the other hats too, be kept forever in a great crystal case by the side of his throne. But neither Bartholomew Cubbins, nor King Derwin himself, nor anyone else in the Kingdom of Did could ever explain how the strange thing had happened. They could only say it just happened to happen, and was not very likely to happen again. The end. Yay! That's so many hats.
It really is.
500 hats. I don't know what I would do with 500 hats.
That last one was a look, though.
That was such a cool hat.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to recreate it one day, but definitely not with ostrich feathers and mockingbird feathers and rubies.
Yeah.
And I don't have that kind of money.
We're on a budget.
Pink craft store flowers. Feathers. Words are hard.
It's okay. You just said a bunch of words very well.
I did. I said very many words. That story is, let's see, starts on page 44, it goes to page 91. I can't count. That's like almost 50 pages of words.
That was longer than I thought it would be.
Yeah, same. I was like reading and I'm like, oh, I'm still going. I know there's a lot of hats in this story, but how am I only at like 150? There's still more hats.
That's like at least like 20 hats per page.
Ooh.
I don't math.
An impressive number of hats.
True. What's the
It's
moral?
raining hats. Hallelujah. It's raining hats. Hey, hats.
What's the moral of that story?
The moral of the story is sometimes things just happen.
Is it commission hats?
Commission hats, yes. pay for your art. Otherwise, you will get more than you expected. No, I don't think that's a good moral.
I don't think that's it. That's okay. Sleep on it.
I'll think on the moral of the story if you want to start reading your story.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I decided I'm not going to show the pictures.
That is fair.
Yeah. I'll show you guys the cover though. I'm reading Fancy Nancy, Just My Luck. Let's let it adjust. Okay, there it is. You? Okay. And by Jane O'Connor. For show and share, Clara has a 4-leaf clover. She passes it around. 4-leaf clovers bring good luck, Clara tells everyone. They bring even more good luck than finding a penny. Miss Glass isn't positive that's true. Positive is Fancy, for sure about something. She says, I don't believe in good luck charms. But 4-leaf clovers are quite rare. There aren't a lot of them, so Clara is lucky to have one. At recess, I decide to find a 4-leaf clover of my own. Lionel helps. Here's what we find. A key and some string, a wheel from a toy car, and Robert's library card. Thanks, Robert says. He puts the card in his pocket. It is hard because he is upside down. I'm lucky you found it. On the way inside, I hear someone shouting. It is Grace from another class. Didn't you see what you just did? You stepped on a crack, Grace says. She points to a sidewalk square. There's a big crack in it. So what? I say. Duh, says Grace. Don't you know that's bad luck? No, I say. I wasn't aware of that. It turns out that Grace is an expert on bad luck. Expert is fancy for someone who knows a lot. Walking under a ladder is bad luck. Don't open an umbrella indoors or spill salt. Anything with 13 is bad luck. And you better hope that a black cat never runs by you. That's like double trouble bad luck. Wow, there are so many bad luck things to keep track of. At lunch, I spilled pudding on myself. Maybe it's because I stepped on a sidewalk crack. For bad luck, it is not so bad, but from now on, I need to be more careful. On the way home, I try not to walk on any cracks. I have to back up and leap over this one. Ugh, I just made it. At home, I check all the mirrors. Woo! None of them have cracks. At dinner, Jojo bangs my arm by accident. I almost spilled some salt. That was a close call. The next morning, it is raining. I almost forget about not opening an umbrella inside. Another close call. All day, I stay away from 13s. I eat 14 veggie chips. I use 12 pipe cleaners. Then math gets me in trouble. One of the problems is 6 plus 7. When Miss Glass calls on me, I say, 37? I know that's wrong. But maybe 13 will bring bad luck, big bad luck. By the end of the day, I'm exhausted. That is way more tired and tired. What's wrong? Miss Glass asks. I knew the answer was 13, I say. I explain about bad luck stuff. Keeping bad luck away is hard work. Miss Glass puts an arm around me. Nancy, don't worry about these things. They aren't true, I promise. I want to believe Miss Glass. Miss Glass is very wise after all. That is fancy for extra smart. Walking home, I try not to think about cracks. Then, a block away from my house, something terrible happens. A black kitten comes out of nowhere and runs across the sidewalk. Grace says a black cat is double trouble bad luck. A second later, a boy turns the corner. My kitten got out of the house. Have you seen it? The kitten went to the park, I tell the boy. Without thinking, I help him look. It's just a lost kitten that needs my help. At last, I spot the kitten. It is in a playground tube. I block one end of the tube. The boy crawls in, and out he comes with his kitten. Thanks so much, he says. It sure was good luck that you saw where she ran. Seeing a black cat wasn't bad luck at all. Grace is mistaken. Mrs. Glass is correct. Just before I get home, I see something shiny in a puddle. A penny. A new penny. Maybe it will not bring good fortune. I put it in my pocket anyway. After all, if I find 99 more, I'll have $1. And that is almost a fortune. That's it. The end.
The end.
When $1 was a fortune.
$1 is still a fortune if it's a surprise dollar.
True. Surprise dollars are always a fortune.
That's the best kind. Like when you forget that you had worn some of your regular clothes for drag and then like left the tip in the pocket and then you go to do laundry. You're like, whoa, there's money in here.
That reminds me, I should check my drag suitcase for crumpled dollars.
Ooh, same. I should also do laundry.
Yes.
Taylor from across the house goes, mm-hmm. I'm being shamed for my laundry habits. Oh no.
Oh no. I think
That's okay. You do need to do laundry. It's good to keep busy and make sure that you're actually taking care of yourself and your things. Hello, baby kitty.
Great kitties are very
good.
Okay, bye.
My goodness. So cute.
Do you believe in any
I love like the slow jump and the nyum.
Yeah.
Slowly, slowly, quickly.
Oh, there's a laser pointer on my bed. Get off me.
Ooh.
Sniper in the house. Ah.
Secret agent cat.
Do you believe in any superstitions?
You know, I try not to, but I do. My big one is splitting poles. Like if you're walking with a group of people or even just one person, and there's like a pole, whether it's like in a doorway or it's like a light post, don't split it, because the idea is that if you split the pole, then your group is going to split. And I picked that one up from band because we would go to competitions like either the whole marching band or just the color guard, and we'd be like walking in 2 lines, and when we got to a door, instead of just going around the pole, we would zipper in and then zipper back out.
Wait. Oh, you'd like come together to get through one door.
Yeah, so it'd be like 2 lines, and then you would like crisscross in and then go through the door and then crisscross back out into 2 lines.
That's funny. That's cute. Yeah, that's the one I hear.
There's also good team building.
Yeah, I bet. That's the one that that I hear people talk about the most of my friends.
Yeah. I think it shows that we just care about each other and don't want to lose each other.
Yeah. I do believe that breaking mirrors is bad luck, but only I had this house that was like cursed to like break glass. Like everything broke on the ground. Like a cast iron, we broke a cast iron. Many mugs, many everything.
You can break that?
Yeah. Yeah, I broke that. Well, it's because I think we broke a mirror, and I think it cursed us into breaking like everything else. But also, like the floors were freaking concrete.
Oh yeah, I'll get ya.
Yeah, they were like really.
Ooh, one that one is the opening umbrellas inside, but that's like not even just a superstition. That's also like, it's kind of rude. It takes so much space, and you could get water on people if it's a wet umbrella.
True. Yeah, that's just like awkward.
Like, hello, welcome to my pool. I like your sloth, by the way.
Thank you. I've got many sloths.
2 sloths!
I've got like 5, so there's Susan. Hey, Susan. Anyway, this is my favorite animal. In case anyone was wondering.
I like those those dolphins when they brought the sloths to their tank, and the dolphins are just like,
Oh no, I still didn't see that one. Okay, this one too.
I'll see if I can hunt it down and show it to you. It's very, very cute.
I meant to look search for it, but I forgot. I wonder if Build-A-Bear has sloth.
I have to search that too. I love Build-A-Bear.
Me too. That's my gonna be my birthday trip once we're done quarantining.
Once we're free!
Once we're free.
Free at last! Free at last!
And not just like Rapunzel in a tower.
Yeah. But not on April 30th, because that is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
Everybody, please continue to stay inside as much as you are able. Georgia hasn't quite hit its peak for coronavirus infections, and the best way to keep yourself and everyone around you safe is to not be around people.
Yeah.
And it definitely sucks, but it's also a good time to learn how to do other methods of communication, because even when we are able to be back out in the world and seeing each other face to face all the time, sometimes you won't have the energy or you won't feel like going out. And now you know these different ways of communicating with people. So learn some new communication skills, keep in contact with your friends, do fun stuff at home.
It's funny. I feel like I'm in better contact with some of my friends that don't live in the state now too. Which is nice.
Me too.
Yeah. Because I used to be so bad at that. I would lose contact with people once they left. I'd be like, Howie.
I love you. Goodbye forever.
Goodbye.
Well, on that note, I think that is all that we had for tonight.
Okay. I can't get closer. I'm stuck. Okay.
Hello. Ooh. Facial hair and nose.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much to everyone who tuned in. We had a blast. And I will be downloading the video, posting it on YouTube, and sharing the link to Facebook for everyone to see as soon as that is up. Thank you so much.
We'll see you next Thursday. Bye.